I see people. Ooh, there we are. Hopefully everybody can hear us. Mic settings. Sorry, this is my first time doing this and kind of a crash course in StreamYard and posting. Oops, I don't know what's happening. Ooh, okay, now I'm playing my own. All right, so I'm gonna assume we're live, even though nobody's commenting. So thanks for joining us today. And I'm Melissa Wagner, and I have Michelle Starr with us, or with me. We have no lights, so it's going to be a little dark on our faces. But today we're going to be talking about carp fishing. And kind of the reason I wanted to do this as a topic is I saw some buzz on our Facebook site about people kind of wanting to get their last minute wham slam points, and people were focusing on carp but weren't really sure what to do. And so we decided to add this as our first speaker circuit topic. And I asked Michelle, who I met at the border battle this spring, if she would join me, because she has been doing awesome in Wham Slam and has been able to catch some carp. So I'm going to go through a few slides here to start. And I also reached out to, oh, there's people. Hello. Hello. I also reached out to a guy that is pretty well known in the DNR. He works for our IT department, but he's big into rough fish fishing. I think he's pretty much caught every red horse sucker, carp sucker, and carp there is in Minnesota. And I reached out to him to ask for some tips and tricks so that he didn't have to join us in the middle of nowhere. So Michelle was fortunate enough to meet me halfway. She had a training in Bloomington, and I'm down in the southeast. We met halfway. We are in Zumbrota. The river is behind us. It's really pretty. There's the covered bridge. So yeah. So he didn't have to come down here. I just kind of asked him for some tips and tricks. So a little bit about carp. So they're typically bottom feeders. And so, you know, on the bottom you have the worms and the snails and stuff. So they like meaty bait. So you can use worms, you can use shrimp, and you can fish that weighted on the bottom. But what's kind of unique about carp and their what they like is they also have some more vegetarians in the group. So you can also use a vegetable bait. Oftentimes people are using corn. I guess the advantage of this is that a lot of other fish don't like them. So if you're specifically trying to target carp, you know, you can use more of the corn and this other bait that we're going to show you today, and not use the worms. But if you're just fishing a river where you don't really care what you catch, you know, I guess the preferred bait would usually be the worms. He also mentioned that you can see them surface feeding at times, and he calls it clooping, and that's like the sound that they make as they're going across the surface, you know, making that noise with their mouth on the surface of the water. And with that, he said, if it's, you know, calm, you can take a non-weighted line and hook like a floating crusty bread or something that'll just float on the top. When they're doing that, they're actually feeding on algae, sometimes mulberries, and he said cotton fuzzies, which I have actually seen at my cabin. I was like, did that fish just eat that cotton fuzzy? So that's kind of another trick. If you see that happening, go get your hook and line and throw a piece of crusty bread on there and try to catch a carp. They're also spring spawners, and this is an easy time to locate them. So they're very active in the shallows, splashing around. They will feed in between their spawning times. So if you see them doing that, you could also do this, throw something weighted out on the bottom, because they're going to be stirring up the top. You know, you're not going to be able to float something on top. And they will eat their own eggs. So, you know, some might be in there trying to spawn, others might be in there eating the others' eggs. So, but it's also just an easy time to maybe locate a spot where you'd come back, you know, a little later. And then this was kind of interesting. He talked about, like, when they are feeding, you know, they're disturbing the bottom. So you can see sometimes this plume of muck and this small bubbles. So I envision this is where there's like deeper water. You can't necessarily see them. Maybe you're either out on a boat or a dock that's further out. And he said oftentimes you can kind of just drop a line down and catch one. If anybody has any questions along the way, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll just keep on plugging away before we lose daylight. So where to fish? So most Minnesota rivers do have a pretty good population of carp. They're common, as the name common carp. So you can catch them in many of our different rivers. Also, they'll live in the smaller marginal lakes that aren't as great for other fish. And you can always use our DNR lake finder to, if you're going to a lake and curious if there's carp, they should show up in the assessment. So seeing if there's carp in there, using the lake finder. And if anybody has any questions, I can help people with that as well. Retention ponds are also popular, or reservoirs. And then here's a couple spots that I learned about. So the Coon Rapids Dam, where some whammies have been going out and fishing. And then the IT guy said Taft Lake is his personal favorite place to go near the airport. And so if there's any others, shoot them in the chat or share them with, people on Facebook, because, a great carp spot maybe is worth sharing versus like your favorite walleye or crappie spot. I'm going to let Michelle take it over. Here's her awesome carp.
Hi, everyone. I can't wait to see you all at the Spooktacular. I'm going to talk a little bit about tackle and my rod setup. I do use a medium to heavy rod and reel. I have 50-pound braid line, and then my typical tackle that I use it's very cheap. You can get a 4-pack of these egg sinkers at Walmart for $1. I get a pack of heavy-duty swivels, also about $1. And then also, you can also get these pre-made swivels. The only downside to the swivel or the pre-made hooks are, I think these only have about 15-pound test on there. They don't say, but after I researched, it looks like they're only about 15. But you can also make your own, and then the advantage of making your own is you could make them a little bit longer, because I think ideally you want it to be probably about 18 inches, where the pre-made ones are only about 12. I usually start out with a 1-ounce sinker, and then the 1 ounce, that's usually about the biggest you can find for the egg sinkers. But if you're in a lot of current and you need to use a bigger weight, I'll bring up to a 5-ounce weight. And then if you're using a weight like this, you'll also want to get a sinker slider, so that way the loops aren't tearing up your line and you're breaking your line because of that. Otherwise, that's all I can think of.
Here's the...
Oh, yes, and if you do want to tie your own snelled hooks, there's an awesome knot that works and simple if you want to make your own too. So I usually use a size 1 hook. I know a lot of carp fishermen do use a smaller hook than that, but typically I'm using night crawlers, so I like a little bit bigger hook. But carp will, if they do feel the hook, they will spit it out. So if you're going to use a bigger hook, make sure you have a big gob of night crawler, so that way all they're tasting is the food.
Next.
About this?
Yeah. So next, we're kind of have a little bait that you can make just out of your own cupboard and pantry. So we have the cream corn.
Yes.
And the old-fashioned oats, and they can be stale as stale can be. I still have a bag in my cupboard that I just keep using.
Yes.
But the cream corn, other tips are you can add Jell-O to that mixture. But what kind of ratio do you just typically use?
I use about 1 pound of oats to 1 full can of cream corn. And you really have to mix it in a bowl for about 15 minutes to get it to the firm consistency that you want it to be. You want it to be pretty hard. I do want to add that in Minnesota, it is illegal to chum for fish. So you can't just take a handful of corn and whip it out there and, to try to lure in fish. You can't do that. You also, in Minnesota, can't, I know some carpet fishermen will take a ball like this and they'll wrap it around their sinker, and then they'll wrap their hook around. if you're going to use bait balls like this, you do have to make sure that it is actually on your hook. So I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of that.
Another thing that I did when I first did this last year to catch a carp was I hooked like some. So like, how would you hook that onto your hook?
So I do have my hook here. So what I'll do is you push it in. You want it to be about a little bit bigger than a golf ball, and you're going to poke it in here. You're going to poke the hook in, and you're going to put the ball around there, and you want to make sure, like I say, it's really firm. When you cast it out, if that bait ball is falling off, you should be adding more oats. We don't want to be littering the waters, and the DNR also will talk to you about that if that is happening. So make sure that you have a very firm ball and that it's really sticking on there.
So the one thing that I did was I hooked some corn. I think my stuff was maybe not as dry, but I hooked like a bunch of corn on the hook first, so then it kind of gives your hook like more substance, or not as like skinny, or that it might slip off there. So kind of got to play around with it, but I think that's kind of fun to be able to just like make your own bait, go out cheap and easy. We got the cheap and easy rig to do as well. So is that our last slide? No, I don't remember. Oh, just some other tips.
Get comfy.
Here's Pam. I stole your slide off your Facebook. So get comfy. You might be there a while, sitting, waiting. Again, make sure you have a heavy enough rod. Don't take your ultralight out there. You know, these can get very large. So,
and I don't think I said, but when I'm making my own snelled hooks, I usually will typically use a 35-pound mono. And the benefit of using mono versus braided line for your snelled hooks is it won't tangle as easy. If you try to make your snelled hooks out of braid, when you cast, it can get tangled up with your swivel and can get tangled up with your weight. So I just recommend using mono for any snelled hooks that you're going to make yourself.
Some, if you're not in like flowing water, keep your bail open if you're not paying attention, or they will they almost set their hook as they're biting too at times. So if you're not paying attention, you may lose your rod. Bring a friend and a net. So making sure, they're going to get heavier as they get out of the water. So making sure you have the ability to get them out of there without wrecking too much of your stuff. And then as with most like river shore fishing, you're going to get stuck on rocks. So bring extra tackle and find kind of, spots that maybe there aren't as jaggedy rocks to fish from. Or as you're like reeling into the shallows, you can just reel faster and lift your rod up so that you're not dragging that, like sinkers usually I think what gets stuck. So you're not like dragging that along the bottom and the rocks. But yeah, so I don't know if there's any question. Like Tina Turner. What's Tina Turner?
I think she's.
Oh, nice legs. Now I see it. Oh, keep bail open. How long should you let them run with it? Well, I think the circle hooks actually do a pretty good job. Once they suck it in, I mean, you can start reeling them in, right? Or do you let them go with it? And
so I will do two different ways. If I'm fishing with a night crawler, I keep my finger on the line, and as soon as I feel them nibbling, I'll give it a little bit of slack, and when I feel them pulling, I'll set the hook. If I'm using the bait ball, what you want to do if you're using the bait ball is you want to leave it set there, and you want to hold the rod firmly, but don't move it, because if they feel your movement, they're going to spit your bait ball out and leave. So what I do is I set my drag really loose, and I want to hear that drag, fizz, and as soon as I hear that zzz, then I'll set the hook at that time. So really it depends on which bait you're using on which way you want to do that, but that's what I do.
Any other questions?
Yep, that's good, Pam. Give them a little time.
Around 5 to 10 seconds. Set the hook by just reeling. Yeah, and that's what I heard from the guy I spoke to. He's like, they kind of set the hook themselves as they're eating it. So, maybe the hook isn't as important. It's just always natural for us to want to do that. With most other fish, we're setting the hook. So, yeah, I brought a light because I knew it was going to get dark. Any other questions or things like helpful tips? We are not this is kind of just the way that like Michelle prefers to fish. On my bait caster, I leave the bail open. On my other rod, I set my drag super light and listen to it go wee. Yeah, that's fun too.
That's
That
fun.
is a fun sound. Yep.
Can't beat that sound.
Any other questions or comments or places people have been going fishing? Oh, here. I learned how to do this too. I'm going to get fancy now. Oh, that was not the right one. Oh, that's a good one too. Go get them, ladies. A few more days to go. Yeah. I like Coom Rapids Dam, but I also have another dam that is much smaller. Ooh. Maybe Pam doesn't want to share locations just yet. Maybe, maybe once the Wham Slam is over, she'll share her secret spot.
Yes.
Supposedly, there's a series of retention ponds in the West Metro that this guy said, but I don't know where they are. But
there really are a ton of carp though at the Coon Rapids Dam. Next summer for sure, I want to set up a Wham meet up there, just because there's a lot more room there for everyone compared to some of the other spots. So we could get a big group of us there, and yeah, so for sure next summer I want to set that up, and hopefully all of you can come.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, anything else before we sign off? I just want to thank you guys for joining us on the first speaker circuit. I thought this was kind of a fun idea to do, and hopefully it's been helpful for you guys to listen in on. This is going to be, or it's being recorded, good, bad, or otherwise, and hopefully if you're watching later on YouTube, you can get out there and catch some carp.
Yeah, good luck, ladies.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
See you soon.